Hello again. Chapter 4 of Mrs. Noodle-Kugel. I hope I'm saying that right. I need to look it up again. Nick and Maxine could smell something delicious baking. "Have you children come to visit me?" the little old lady asked. "My name is Mrs. Noodle-Kugel. And what are your names?" And here's a picture of Mrs. Noodle-Kugel and Maxine and Nick. See how pretty good in there. She looks like kind of a sweet little lady. I think it's funny. She's wearing a dress and then tennis shoes. Do you see her tennis shoes? Nick and Maxine told Mrs. Noodle-Kugel their names. "Now that we have introduced ourselves, please come in and have some apple cookies," Mrs. Noodle-Kugel said. "Mr. Fuzzface, that is the name of my cat, baked them." "Your cat can bake cookies?" "Mr. Fuzzface is a very good baker. All Danish blues are." "Danish blues?" Maxine asked. "That is the type of cat he is," Mrs. Noodle-Kugel said. "The Danish blue is a very rare breed and quite intelligent. Mr. Fuzzface is also an expert dancer, and he is teaching himself to play the piano." So here we have a cat named Mr. Fuzzface who can talk, bake cookies, dance, and he's learning to play the piano. Pretty crazy. "Do the children want milk with their apple cookies or tea?" Mr. Fuzzface called from the kitchen. Ooh, a good reader. So I just made a mistake, friends. A good reader tries to change their own voice when the characters in the story change. So it was Mrs. Noodle-Kugel's voice, so I should kind of sound more like an older lady when I am talking, when I'm trying to sound like Mrs. Noodle-Kugel. And then when the cat starts talking, I should sound a little bit more like a cat. I'm not sure what a cat would sound like, but I should change my voice a little bit because then the people hearing my story can understand that different characters in my story are talking. So let me try that again. I'm going to back up a little bit. So this is Mrs. Noodle-Kugel talking. "That is the type of cat he is," Mrs. Noodle-Kugel said. "The Danish blue, a very rare breed and quite intelligent. Mr. Fuzzface is also an expert dancer, and he is teaching himself to play the piano." "Do the children want milk with their apple cookies or tea?" Mr. Fuzzface called from the kitchen, "because I don't think we have enough milk." I don't really like the voice I chose for the cat, but it was the first thing I thought of. "Tea will be fine," Maxine and Nick said. "With lemon?" Mr. Fuzzface called. "That will be fine too," the children said. Almost as surprising as the cat that talked was Mr. Fuzzface carrying a tray of cookies, then the teapot and cups, and arranging them on the table. So here's Mr. Fuzzface, the cat, bringing a whole tray of cookies and tea and cups to the table. "Mr. Fuzzface is a very capable cat," Mrs. Noodle-Kugel said. "We see that," Nick and Maxine said. "Shall I call the mice?" Mr. Fuzzface asked. "Yes," Mrs. Noodle-Kugel said. "The children will enjoy seeing the mice, and the mice will enjoy some crumbs." So this chapter book actually has quite a few more pictures than the last few I showed you, the last few I read, but it does have a couple little pictures. So they're at the table eating their tea and cookies, and now they're calling for the mice that also live in the house. "Mice are going to eat with us?" Nick and Maxine asked. "Oh, it would not be a tea party without the mice," Mrs. Noodle-Kugel said. That is the end of chapter 4. We'll see you next time for chapter 5.